Hello everybody, my name is Lorelei, or Maddie, and today I'm reading chapter 23 of #Murder Trending by Gretchen McNeil. Let's get right into it. Dee sat up all night on the stairs. She thought it was the most strategic location in the house. If somebody came in through the upstairs windows, then she could make a run for it downstairs. Plus, she tied the sheets from her bed together and anchored them to the dresser in front of the bedroom. So if someone smashed through the sliding glass door downstairs or kicked in the front entrance, she could escape from the second floor like a true fairy tale princess shining down from her tower. It might even score points on the fan forums for being a Rapunzel-esque maneuver. Of course, if the Hardy girls split up and entered her house on both levels at the same time, she was pretty much screwed. She had been exhausted when she'd gone upstairs to wash her face, but the message on the inside of the closet door had sobered her up immediately. If she had any doubts about the connection between Kiyomi and the postman, they evaporated in an instant, because nobody else knew her real name. The trial had been on total lockdown since both Dee and her kidnapper were minors. Pseudonyms were used for both of them, and no press was allowed in the courtroom. Kiyomi was only 14 at the time, and since she hadn't physically harmed Dee by keeping her locked in the family safe room for almost a week, except for the lack of food and sanitation, Dee's lawyer had pointed out, but whatever, the juvenile court accepted a plea deal. Kiyomi was sentenced to the Western Syria State Mental Hospital for a period no less than 10 years, which meant that she should still be there. After the sentencing, Dee and her dad tried to return to normal lives. Dee went back to school, her dad went back to work at the production company, and despite her insomnia, her constant fear of being alone, and the twice-weekly visits to a therapist, life had settled down. Then suddenly, a couple of months after the trial had ended, Dee's dad sold their condo in Manhattan Beach and moved himself and his daughter to Burbank. The move was swift, and her dad had given her no warning. He picked her up from school on a Friday afternoon, and when they got home, the movers had already packed up the entire condo. They left that day, and on the drive out to Burbank, in Friday rush hour traffic, Dee's dad had told her that from now on, her name wasn't Dolores Hernandez, but Dee Guerrera. She was never to tell anyone who she really was, and she could never contact her old friends. He took her cell phone, replaced it with a new one, erased all her contacts from the cloud. Her dad had never been particularly strict, but when it came to rules, but on this point he was adamant. They had to leave their old lives behind. They were starting over, and from that day on, the name Dolores was never spoken. So who else knew about it? Kiyomi, of course. Kiyomi's dad, Dee's dad, the police detectives who had taken Dee's initial testimony, Dr. Farouk, and the therapist Dee had seen right after her abduction. It was a short list. Could the postman have gotten his hands on the details of Dee's trial? Possibly. He seemed all-powerful, but the simpler solution was that he was immediately acquainted with both Kiyomi and Dee. Was it really possible that Kiyomi's dad was the postman? Dee didn't see why not. No one seemed to know anything about the postman other than that he was a Hollywood producer who had come up with the perfect solution for America's rising tide of violent crime. Even though most of the news reports that Dee had seen swore that violent crime in America was at an all-time low, but apparently facts didn't matter under this presidency. The government cut a deal with the postman and turned over a portion of the prison system to him. And once the Postman app was launched, introducing 250 million Americans to televised capital punishment, no one cared about the rationale anymore. You couldn't argue with ratings. But why would a Hollywood producer want to run a glorified death row? Sure, the ultimate reality show was ridiculously popular, but this whole setup must have been ridiculously expensive too. Was it really worth the expenditure? What could the postman hope to gain? Power? Fame? The sick thrill of having so many lives on his hands? The White Room. Kiyomi had said that her dad killed people there. What if it was true? What if the entire rationale behind Alcatraz 2.0 was to satisfy the postman's own bloodlust? She needed to talk to Niles. He'd be walking up to the guard station in a few hours for his noon meeting with his attorneys. She'd have to trust him with the secret of her past, the thought of which made her head ache. But there was no helping it. If she was right, the world needed to know. It was 7:30 when Dee slowly rose from her vigil on the stairs. She didn't bother to get changed. Just splashed some water on her face, as usual, ignoring the sparkling cosmetics provided for her intended use, and headed downstairs. Coffee and a banana, then she'd wait for Niles out front. She didn't want to miss him. Dee was nuking her coffee when Mariah appeared at the back door. She clearly wasn't expecting Dee to follow through. On her offer of breakfast. Mariah knocked on the sliding door, but kept her arms wrapped tightly around her body as if she thought Dee might tell her to fuck off. Sadly, there was a part of Dee that wanted to, not because she didn't like her neighbor, but because she was concerned for Mira's safety. People connected to Dee ended up dead, plain and simple. Monica, Blair, even Dr. Farouk. It was bad enough that Niles, Ethan, and even that pain in the ass Griselda might be on the firing line. Did she really want to add another name to the list? Still, she didn't have the heart to ignore her neighbor. Just a quick cup of coffee wouldn't hurt. Hey, Dee said, lifting the booby-trap cardboard cup from the counter as she slid open the door. Hungry? Mariah didn't step inside. Are you sure? I have some burrito left over. I can just eat. Dee shoved a banana into Mira's hand. I'm sure. They ate bananas and sipped black, watery coffee outside on the moldy wicker furniture and made small talk. Dee learned that Mira was from Orange Country, just an hour and a half away from where Dee lived in Burbank, and had been about to start college when she was arrested over the summer. Mr. Carpenter was a teacher at my high school, Mira said. He taught safety ed and remedical math. They said I shot him dead in his classroom after summer school one day. A premeditated fit of jealousy. She bowed her head, her face pinched with embarrassment. Supposedly I was in love with him and he rejected me. Were you? Ew, no. I didn't even know who he was. What happened at the trial? All these horrible girls from school testified that I used to hang around Mr. Carpenter's classroom. Mariah clenched her jaw, her fingers wrapped so tightly around her coffee cup that Dee was afraid it might crumple. They supposedly found my fingerprints on the murder weapon, but I'd never seen a gun in my life, let alone fired one. I wouldn't know how. The whole thing felt like the Salem witch trials, you know? Guilty no matter what. Dee smiled wryly. I know how you feel. Well, Mariah said, standing up, thanks for breakfast. I should let you get to work. Can I ask you something? Dee asked before her neighbor dashed back into her own house. Mariah glanced at her apprehensively. Okay. Did you write fan fiction on the Postman form? Mariah's green eyes grew wide. I would never. She sounded mortally offended. Oh, sorry, Dee said quickly. I just thought that stuff about Molly you mentioned. It's not fiction. Something about Mariah's tone, sharp and serious, like a child who tells a fanciful tale, but insists it really happened, gave Dee pause. You mean Molly Mahler is actually a 43-year-old stay-at-home mom from Michigan? Mariah gave an emphatic nod, then dropped her voice. Her name is Ruth Martincello, and she lives at 157 Hillcrest Avenue. That can't be true. It is. Mariah's voice was hardly above a whisper, and I could do better than that. I know all of the killer's secret identities, where they live, what they do, and most importantly, where they kill. She leaned forward. That's the reason I'm still alive. That is a crazy ending to chapter 23. I will see you guys next time for chapter 24. Bye-bye.